Hello, this is Kathy coming to you live on Facebook now. A little technical glitch, but I am here nevertheless, ready to share with you inherited property. Now what? And I am about to get some feedback, so I will turn myself down on the other screen. Okay, 1 second. Let me turn this down. All right. Love it, Lord, when it all comes together, because I do believe all things work together for the good. And this is a good cause, inheriting property. Now what? I am Kathy Cross Reese coming to you live in the Inherited Property Facebook group. It is a private Facebook group, and I am happy to share with you some information and training on what you can do to prepare not only if, but when this happens, because we all want to receive an inheritance. The Bible says a good man or woman leaves an inheritance for his children's children. And I believe when the word speaks about his, it's talking about us. And so in this particular challenge, I want to share with you some deep revelations that I have come to know in my own life, as well as what I've shared with other people that I have worked with. Now, I started out when I was starting this challenge, I thought, what would resonate with people, and what do I think people really need to hear? Because as I said, I believe the word that says a good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children, but how do you receive that inheritance, and what do you do with it when you get it? In fact, I want to back up a little bit. This is my 12th challenge. I am a real estate broker. I'm here in my office tonight. I've been a licensed broker for 28 years. During those 28 years, I've seen some ebbs and flows in the market, and there's one thing that reigns true. Real estate is built on relationships, and real estate is something that we, as I believe kingdom citizens, have a right to take territory. And in that process of taking territory, we can't take it with us when we leave our bodies, right? When we leave this world, we can't take it with us. And I learned firsthand when I received my inheritance, what I needed to do with it. Now, there are a lot of factors I'm going to go through today, but really what I want you to remember most is you have an inheritance. If you do not have an inheritance, you can create an inheritance. You get to do that. It is a matter of a decision. You get to decide, okay? If I am not receiving an inheritance from my parents, then I can create an inheritance for my children's children. Now the key is, what do you do when you receive that inheritance? Let's back that up even further. Today, I met with a couple and we had this conversation, and that's how it starts. It starts with a conversation. Oftentimes, we don't want to have those discussions about what happens when we're not here, because human nature is to feel we're invincible, we're always going to be here. But the reality is we have an expiration date. Each and every one of us has an expiration date. And with that expiration date, we need to decide, what are we going to do with what's left behind? So when we have those conversations, either with our parents, with our spouse, with our loved ones, with our children, we get to have those conversations based on where our loved ones are. Today, I met with a couple older couple, and I shared with them my own story. And there are two things that were in common, I believe, with our stories. One thing they wanted to do was avoid taxes. They wanted to avoid inheritance tax. And in my situation, when I received my inheritance, I wanted to avoid probate. And so there's two different ditches, if you will, that you can fall into when it comes to inheriting property. One of the ditches happens to be taxes. There is what you call inheritance tax when you receive an inheritance. And then the other ditch is probate. Probate happens when you don't have a will and the state, the government, if you will, gets to decide what to do with your property. And that is one ditch you do not want to get in. And the other ditch of inheritance tax you do not want to get in. So today I want to share with you on some precursors or some preventative ways to avoid those two ditches. So follow me if you will. We're starting with a conversation. It's important to have these conversations with your loved ones on what you want to happen to your property when you're no longer here. In my particular situation, my father has started having some medical issues, and he started to have more and more conversations with me about, well, should he buy insurance? Should he buy mortgage insurance? Should he buy life insurance? All of these questions, and we had these conversations back and forth. At the time, I thought, why are we having these conversations? I didn't want to talk about this because in my mind, I'm thinking, if you're talking to me about dying, then that means you're dying. So I really didn't want to hear those things. But it's so important to have those conversations because in the absence of those conversations, what happens is you run into one of those ditches, either the ditch of inheritance tax or the ditch of probate. And as I said, if you run into the ditch of probate, where the state gets to decide or the municipality gets to decide what happens to your property, you end up losing, right? Because there's going to be expenses along the way. Because if they are deciding what happens to your property, what happens if it doesn't come back to you? And that may have been your parents' intention or your intention for that property to go to a certain person. So having this conversation is paramount. It's number one in terms of deciding what you're going to do with the property. Well, some of you may say, I don't even have property. I'm just taking this to figure out what this is all about. Well, one day, if you have property, one day you won't be here and something will happen to the property. Or you might have living parents. I still have a mother that's alive. So if you have living parents and your parents own real estate, then these are conversations that I suggest you have. And the first part of the conversation, there's kind of the ditches that we talked about. The first thing that I wish I would have done for my father, although he opposed doing it, is life insurance. Now, when you get older, you might outlive your life insurance, so that may not be the best option for you. But term life insurance is pretty cheap, and you can get some term policy. In fact, there are term life, and I'm not selling life insurance. I'm just saying this is one of the methods that you can use, right, to avoid probate, which I said is one of the ditches when it comes to inherited property. So you can purchase life insurance. Life insurance will help you to at least have some funds and be able to pass that on to your family so that they can manage the property. That's one thing. And then the other thing to avoid the inheritance tax is you can have a will. A will is something very simple you can draft up. There are tutorials online on YouTube on how to draft up a will. You can draft up a will, very simple, get it notarized. Depending on what state or country you're in, there may be different rules on making that will valid or not. So when you have those conversations, ask those questions. Do you have insurance? Do you want insurance? How much insurance do you want? Ask those questions about insurance. And when it comes to inheritance tax, if you have that will, then that will help with that. But there's another, I call it a secret weapon, and it has to do with transferring real estate. It happens to do with deeds. Now, there are a myriad amount of deeds, and it depends on, again, which state you live in, which municipality, but deeds, if you understand that, a title deed to a property says you are insured, you are the insured owner of that property. If there's any encumbrances or anything that take attempts to take away your rights to that property, this is your insurance. You get title insurance. So with the title deed, you can transfer property upon death. In fact, I had that conversation with a couple today, and I referred them to an attorney that I work with because an attorney can prepare this. You can also go to a title company if you want to do something as simple as a quitclaim deed. Now, I'm not advising you on which is better for you. I'm just saying these are some tools and some resources that you can use to avoid those ditches. Those ditches, again, are probate and inheritance tax. So those are the ditches that we want to avoid when it comes to inheriting property. Now, who does not want to inherit property? At the time, I didn't know I was going to inherit property. As far as my parents' primary residence. Now, they had some investment properties that my father, before he passed away, a couple of years before he passed away, he did transfer those properties into my name with the understanding between him and I that they are his properties until he passes away. And so, depending on your family relationship, if you have investment properties, you can have those conversations because, again, you want to avoid those ditches. My father did not have a will and he did not have life insurance. So he did not have two of the things that he needed to avoid probate and to avoid inheritance tax. But I say I received an inheritance because he prepared early. He prepared in advance before he passed away by meeting with an attorney and transferring the property over, right? Transferring that real estate into my name. So I'm just going to check real quick to see if anyone else has joined us. I started late, so apologize for those of you who, when I set up this Facebook group, I set up a new group. And one of the little technical glitches that I had to do with linking Zoom. So that's full disclosure. That was what happened today. But I'm excited to share this with you. And the workbook that accompanies this challenge has to do with um, um, it's a workbook and it has homework in it and some different strategies and skills in it. But the sale of that workbook is a $7 donation, if you will. And all of those proceeds will go to a nonprofit that is being birthed by a friend of mine who happened to have lost her son to suicide. I say we've experienced his loss. And I see through other people that I have conversations with that there is a generation of youth, I say young adults, 20s, 30 something, that are struggling. And I don't know if it's COVID, I don't know if it's, and these are people that were raised by parents that are kingdom citizens that know their birthright, right? And they're really struggling. And so I wanted to give back in the sense that, and have you give back as well, just a little token of, of seed money for her to start this grassroots movement to help those who might be contemplating suicide. So that is the story or the heart behind creating the workbook. And the workbook is of value to you. It's for you to write your notes. And I would say put those 2 ditches in there because that's an extra nugget that you get only by coming to this live challenge. And if you know of someone who might need this information and be able to share it with others, please share this Facebook group. Now that I've got it all synced, I shouldn't have any technical glitches tomorrow, but I wanted to just share this with you and see if this is something that resonates with you, because as I said, I do believe we as kingdom citizens, if you're a kingdom citizen, and even if you're not, I believe it's our God-given right to acquire property and to be able to, take territory and come up with within our society, at least in America, we have we have title insurance and we have life insurance, and I'm sure in other countries you have that too. Life insurance and you have taxes. That seems to be a common thread throughout the world. We have those things. So with inheritance tax, a way to avoid that, as I said, is to have that will in place. Well, no, inheritance tax, to avoid that, you speak to an estate planner. Excuse me. I'm gonna drink some water 1 second. An estate planner that will, and I have a good friend who actually spoke on my last challenge. His name is Christopher Brown. He spoke on a workshop, and he gave a good analysis on just what happens in the way that you transfer property and things that you could do to avoid probate and inheritance tax. So going back to conversations, having those heart-to-heart conversations. As I said, when I was speaking to my father before he passed away, it was a good year we were having these conversations. And you don't have to wait until you think someone's about to pass away, because the person that's sick may not be the person that passes away. It could be the person that's perfectly healthy that has an accident and then they're no longer here. Because my friend that I was talking to today, friends and clients, he's pretty ill. He has cancer and it's been removed, but he's pretty frail right now. And so they were thinking, we really need to get some guards in place to keep our assets within our family and to make sure that it gets passed on to the right party. So we had those conversations, and the questions that I asked them and they asked questions of me all had to do with, what do I do now? What do I do with this property? Now they want to pass it on to their daughter. Well, she wants to pass it on to her daughter. Her husband wants to pass it on to their grandkids. So they're still having that conversation to see what might be the best approach, because they did a little test drive on this inheritance piece. They gave their grandsons money for college. It was kind of like a little college fund that they had saved up from their hard work. They saved up money for their grandsons to go to college. Well, they realized that their grandsons and granddaughter quickly spent through it. And so based on that, they're kind of reassessing how to handle the inheritance. When you look at inheritance, you want to evaluate who you're leaving. It's like a gift. You're giving this gift to the next generation. And you want to make sure the next generation is able to manage it, able to steward it well. It's great to have it, but if you spin right through it, then it defeats the whole purpose, and really it doesn't leave that legacy that you would like to leave behind, because it's gone. And once it's gone, there's no acquiring, I mean, maybe there's a way, but it's very difficult to acquire all of that that has been accumulated in a lifetime. Some people accumulate a massive wealth in their lifetimes, and they want to ensure, well, I know I want to ensure, I can't speak for everyone, but I know I want to ensure that what I leave behind is stewarded well. I want to be able to train up, as the Bible says, train up a child in a way they will go and they won't depart from it. Well, it might go off track. They might make some mistakes. So you kind of test the water and see, okay, will they be able to handle this? And as they mature, as my children mature, I see in them more ability as time goes by, as we have more conversations about life and about business and about property. Then they come to the realization that, okay, I need to really look out for the next generation. They know that I will look out for them, but they're now learning the principle of looking out for that next generation because they want to be able to leave something for their children or their nephews. And I'm going on overdrive. So let me get back to the book, though, the workbook. The workbook is a 30-page document, and there is some homework in the workbook. So on the first day, there is some homework. I will post the homework sheets in the Facebook group so that you'll see that. There are some people that actually purchase the workbook that won't be able to come on the Zoom because of time, or they might not be able to look at the Facebook group right away. But those of you who do get the workbook, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate your generosity because it means a lot to me. It means a lot to the lady who is going to receive the proceeds from that. And even more, even more. I'm believing that she's going to create, she's birthing a movement, because when you see a problem and your heart aches for it, and you don't ever want someone to go through something as tragic as that, you find a way to generate money to be able to solve that problem. And that's exactly what she is doing. She is creating a movement, and I want to help seed that movement because I can see that being a movement that is much needed in our society. And so switching back, I know I'm kind of going back and forth, but I just kind of remembered that again and wanted to share that again. And so when we think of inherited property, now what? Again, we want to start with those conversations. Just start with the conversation. If you're not close with your family, just maybe starting that relationship again, building that relationship again, where it's been fractured or torn. And one way to build a relationship is to take ownership of where you stand in the problem. You know, am I the problem? Is there something I've done? Is there some forgiveness that I need to extend to the other party? Or is there some forgiveness I need to extend to myself and just kind of let it go? Because life is too short. And so when you have those conversations and building that relationship back up again, then you can it's like an onion. You want to peel those layers off. And when you get down to the source, that's really what you want to deal with. So on the outside, you're going to have all of these things that may have to do with a fractured relationship. I say that because family dynamics are very unique. Some families are well bonded, well connected, and others are fractured and disconnected. And so the first piece, besides getting insurance and all those things, that's great. But if you don't have a relationship with your family, then it's going to be really hard to be able to look at an asset and think about transferring property. So even if we back that up even farther, I'd say day zero, ground zero, if you will, would be building that relationship, bridging those gaps. I know there were times in my family, I would not say I reached a point where I stopped speaking to my parents, never reached that point, but I've reached that point with my children, and it wasn't something that I wished would have ever happened. And I thought we had perfect relationships, and I found out because they weren't speaking to me that it wasn't so perfect. And finding out why and mending those bridges, because once you reconnect, because the enemy wants to steal that, okay? Let me just call it what it is. The enemy doesn't want you to have any of this. So I'm saying this because this is your inheritance. This is an inheritance you get to give, and this is inheritance you get to receive, right? We're talking real estate, but it's more than real estate. It's those relationships that go that go to your parents, your grandparents. I'm fortunate. I got to know both my grandparents on both sides, grandmothers, grandfathers. I got to know them. I got to know what they were like, their personalities, their likes, their dislikes. I got to know, got to know them. And so that's part of your inheritance too. What they've established, not just real estate, but it goes deeper than that. We're talking real estate, but all of that goes deeper. It goes a lot deeper. And so building those relationships with those family members that maybe you've gotten detached from reestablish those. Reestablish those relationships. Let that be your foundation, your ground zero, and then build up from there. Once you've secured those relationships and got your forgiveness in place and you're able to have conversations that are not hurtful or attacking or disparaging, any of those sort of things, and you can speak on an even keel, start having those conversations by asking questions. Ask good questions, not questions that you want to, I was going to say, not questions that you already know the answer to, questions that you're just curious about. Well, had you ever thought of, because I really wanted my father to get life insurance, and he really was not a life insurance type of guy. He just didn't think he needed it. And looking back now, he was right. He did not need life insurance because he had already set up the properties that he owned the way he wanted. And that's another piece we need to consider when we inherit property. What does the person who is giving you the property, what are their wishes? What are their desires? What do they want done with the property? Maybe they want it to stay in the family. I've seen that. Or maybe they want you to sell it and split it amongst the kids. I've seen that. There are a lot of different ways to navigate inherited property. But without those conversations of all the parties involved, it's really hard to know what's the best option. What's the best option for you and your family? What strategy will you employ? It's hard to know without knowing all the parties, without knowing what the intent is of the giver, if you will, the giver of the inheritance. I want to give not just my children, I want to give my children's children property. I want to give my children's children a college fund. I want to give them a shoe up, if you will. I want to give them an opportunity. Now, I want to build some provisions in there, learning from, I believe you can learn from people who have experienced these life principles, these life um, things, these life challenges. Like I just learned from the couple that I was consulting them today, and I learned a lot from them because they said they tested their grandchildren with an inheritance by giving them a college fund. Now I'm thinking, when I hear that, I'm thinking, okay, maybe there needs to be stipulations in the inheritance, like this is how you will use it. It will only be for school. It won't, things like that. There are provisions you can set up. Now, one thing we didn't talk about when it comes to inheritance is trust. A lot of wealthy people actually create trusts, and those trusts are it's another way of avoiding those ditches that we talked about, the ditch of inheritance tax and the ditch of probate. So a trust, that's something I'm aspiring to get. I do not have one yet. I have the LLCs, things like that, but I do not have the trust. If you've heard of that, it's a trust. So we talked about the ditches, we talked about the conversations, we talked about the relationships that go beyond the conversations, because it's hard to have a conversation if there's no relationship, if the person doesn't want to talk to you. Like I said, at one point in life, I have 3 daughters. At one point, at different times, they weren't talking to me. And I didn't know why. They knew why. I didn't know why. I'm sure that doesn't happen to anyone else, right? I had all girls. So now I have grandsons. Thank God. No, I have grandsons now. So they're different. They're just different. It's just different dynamics. Girls are just different dynamics. At least my girls had different dynamics when it comes to communication. So having those conversations can be tough when one party doesn't want to have them. I didn't really want to have these conversations with my father when he was talking about these things about what to do when, because I wanted to hold on to him. I didn't want him to leave. I mean, I'm a realist. I understand, we do have an expiration date, but I didn't want to have those conversations yet. I felt he wasn't ready. I felt that was he was giving up before his time, but he was a smart man. Although he didn't have life insurance, fortunately, I have life insurance. I want to encourage you, those of you listening, to get life insurance. He didn't have a will. I have a will. He didn't have a will. So I want to encourage you to do that if you haven't done that. I want to encourage you to keep those relationships alive. Don't let those relationships die. When I say let those relationships die, don't let too much time get away when you have an offense with a family member, with a friend, whoever you're planning to leave your estate to, who you're planning to pass that inheritance on to. Don't let too much time pass by. We all have an expiration date. And just because we're old and frail doesn't mean we're going to be the first one to go. You could be young and healthy and things happen. I mean, with this pandemic, I've seen young people pass away from the disease, the virus. So death does not discriminate based on age. So it will happen. The question is, will you be ready to receive your inheritance? Will you avoid the ditches of probate? Will you avoid the ditches of inheritance tax? Avoid those ditches, because there is one way that seems right, but it leads to destruction. So the question is, which road will you take? And knowing which road to take depends. It depends on your particular situation. Because as I said, in my situation, with my inheritance that I received, okay, I'm seeing text come through. I was getting a little confused. With the inheritance that I received, I had the mindset that if you're talking about it, that means you're going to die. That's not necessarily so. It could have happened differently, could have happened quite differently. But I believe he knew. I believe my father knew, because 3 months before he passed away, he paid off his house. And in doing so, it freed up the mortgage. So the mortgage was not tied to the property anymore. My mother wouldn't have that obligation, and it would just pass on to her because he didn't have a will and they were married. So the property automatically passed on to her. And then he created, a couple of months before that, not a trust, some death deeds. So that meant upon his demise, the house, which went to my mother, would eventually, upon execution of this death certificate and deed, it would transfer from my mother to all of the children, myself, my sister, and my brother. So we all received it. In fact, my sister, who has since passed away, is still on the deed. That's something we need to get rectified. And my brother is living in the property. And so every family is unique. Your situation will be unique. I just want to share with you one perspective from my journey, as well as others that I have encountered. As early as today, we were having this conversation about what to do when I want to leave this for my children and my grandchildren. What do I do? Who do I talk to? What are the resources? Now, I mentioned some resources in case you didn't get those. Some of the resources have to do with estate planning attorneys, tax attorneys. I have one here locally that I use. Another resource is the title company. You can go to the title company to request a deed, just explain the type of deed that you're looking for to transfer the property. And they may refer you back to the attorney, but at least you can get educated on the types of deeds that are available for your particular situation. We talked about life insurance. You have to decide if that's the best option for you and what type of life insurance. There's term that's pretty inexpensive, comparatively speaking. There is whole life, and there's, oh, I can't think of the other one. There's another one it's escaping me now. There's term, whole life, and I want to say stated, but it's not stated. It's another type of insurance policy. And the other thing, so we talked about the insurance and okay, now can't remember the other one. One other type of insurance that you can get is an umbrella policy. Now that's not life insurance. That's not life insurance. That's not one of those different types of life insurance, but it's an umbrella policy that covers everything. That's just kind of a little bonus tip. Doesn't directly avoid probate or inheritance tax, but it protects you while you're living. And that's important to have that protection over yourself if someone harms themselves on your property or anything like that. So protection is important. And then just bridging those relationships, going back to that onion and making sure that those relationships that you have with your family are solid. Every family's, as I say, unique, but having those sometimes hard conversations. When I was speaking to the couple today, he was the one who requested the meeting because he felt that his time was short. In fact, he even said to me that I was ready to go. You know, when I got the diagnosis, I was ready to go. I didn't really want to have any invasive procedures done. I was ready to check out. But he consulted the Holy Spirit and agreed to stay because his mission in life was not complete. And his wife would have loved him to stay here with her for a lot longer than the time he had spent. So he made that decision, but he prompted the call, but she had the questions. So within a marital relationship, if your spouse has one opinion of what to do and you have a different opinion, have those conversations on what would be the best course of action. Because you might be thinking, I'm just going to leave it to my child. Well, your spouse might be thinking, what about the grandchildren? Whether the grandchildren exist or not, the future grandchildren, you can actually create a trust to keep property in the family name. I have another friend who received property from her grandmother and she received property from her mother. She still owns both properties. She's still paying taxes on them, and she's not quite sure what to do. She doesn't really want to invest, and she doesn't want to rent out the properties. One of them ended up being an apartment complex that got torn down because she didn't really want to keep it up. And then the other one, I can't remember, but it was something else. I think it's a house that's kind of in disrepair. But she didn't really want to spend money on them, but she had I don't know if it was just verbal, but she had her mother as well as her grandmother request of her to keep the property in the family. Now that may be something that you want to do, or that's something that your parents have asked you to do. My father, when he passed on those properties to me, he didn't say that. But when he passed it on to me and I had my sister pass away and saw what happened with her kids not receiving her property, I thought, okay, I need to straighten this out. I need to fix this. I don't know if I probably didn't share this story here, but my sister has two twins. That was her LLC name. She has a set of twins, not two twins, a set of twins, that she named her LLC Two Twins. Now, you would think that with a property like that, with that name, it was named after them, that that property would automatically go to them when she passed away. But that was not the case. Her husband at the time received the property, which is by law, that happens in every, I believe every state, that once one surviving spouse receives the property. At this time, he kept the property, he managed the property. However, he decided he wanted to sell the property, but he ended up getting sick and he passed away. But before he passed away, he made a will. Remember, I said that's one way to avoid the ditch of probate, the ditch of inheritance tax. He had a will. Great. He also had children, and he reconnected with one of his children and decided to pass on the property to his daughter, even though the property was purchased by my sister and she purchased it in an LLC with the twins' name. What happened in the end is his daughter ended up with the property and the twins were without. That's what I want you to avoid. I want you to avoid mistakes happening because you didn't know what to do. You didn't know what to do before the property, before you passed. Didn't have a plan. What happens when? Are you going to pass that on to someone? Now, she had the right thought. She put it in the name, but there's a couple of things she didn't do to protect that by creating a will, by creating a trust, by having that conversation with her husband if something happened to her, what she wanted done with the property. Well, in a community property state, he gets the property, and if it's not in a will or they didn't come to that understanding before she passed, then he gets to do whatever he wants with the property. And that's exactly what happened. So the daughter got the property. So bringing that full circle, I decided, since it was my sister and she had the intent on leaving an inheritance for her children, I told them, and I'm in the process of creating this document when I go back to Wisconsin, a document that will have a succession of ownership for the real estate that we own, meaning we, my brother and I. My brother and I own one property together, and I own all the other assets that my father left behind. And I told them that they could pick out which house they wanted, and I would make sure it got in their name. But I'm even thinking further than that. I'm thinking that their children, to have some provision written that they would need to pass it on and it would remain in the family. At least the primary residence, I want that to be a family home, to stay in the family home. And one of the grandchildren or the great grandchildren can live in the home as long as they keep up with the taxes. And at such a time that they don't, then it could pass on to someone else. There are provisions you can create. You can create your own plan. So in the workbook, there's a spot where you can write down what action steps you're going to take. What is your plan? What are you planning to do about the inheritance you're receiving or you're giving? Remember, it goes both ways. You can receive an inheritance and you can give an inheritance. The Bible says it's more blessed to give than receive. I definitely want to be able to give more than I have received, because it's interesting. I look at what I've created in terms of wealth, in terms of real estate, and it's a lot more than my father, although he did so much more with so little. And I look at that and I say, I need to do better. I need to do better. And maybe you're like me and you're thinking, okay, I need to do better. There's a plan I can create that's going to be even better for my children's children, the inheritance that I leave behind, the structures that I set up, the vehicles that I put in place, because now I know better. Now I know exactly what I need to do to pass on this inheritance. I know what to do. Now I just need to take action and do it. Will you do it? Will you now take some action? Will you now have some conversations? Conversations that you really don't want to have because you really need to have them because it's important. It's important not just for you, but it's important for who you leave behind. It's important for your spouse. I mean, if my sister, I don't know if they did, I can only look at the results and say they must not have had a conversation because he loved her. So I don't think he would have intentionally cut her children out of inheritance, but maybe, just saying, I don't know. I just know that once you know better, you can do better. I think Oprah Winfrey says that. Once you know better, you can do better. So now you can't unknow what you've heard. As they say, unknow. You can't unlearn what you've heard. So now I'm passing it on to you. You have the power. Oh, okay. You have the power to create this plan, this action plan on what you're going to do. You also have the power to create wealth, by the way, but you have the power to create this action plan on what you are going to do when you receive your inheritance and when you give an inheritance. And you get to decide who you're going to give it to. You get to decide who's the responsible child, grandchild, who can manage it, who can I set up systems. Do I need to consider a trust? Do I need to consider a life insurance policy, different types of life insurance policies? Do I need a will? Yeah, I think everyone needs a will. The will is what allowed my brother-in-law to pass on an inheritance to his child. My sister didn't have a will, so she wasn't able to pass on that inheritance to her children. She had a good idea on what she wanted to happen to that property because she even named it Two Twins LLC. Very, very clear in what her desire was. However, her husband, I don't know, maybe they did not have that conversation. Sometimes you think you know and you don't know if you don't have the conversation. Have to have the conversation. So that's like the foundation for today's discussion. Have the conversations. Know what your desires are. Know what your spouse's desires are. If you have living parents, again, know what their desires are so that you can pass on an inheritance to those you love, right? To your children's children and generations to come if you want to do a trust for generations to come. So I am going to wrap this up today by bringing us back to why I even started this. I started this challenge framework with Pedro Adao about a year and a half ago, and this is my 12th challenge. I have learned, I have grown, I have shared, I've cried, I've really learned that this framework is a good framework to deliver content that can be monetized. And so one of the pieces of content that I want to monetize is something that I want to help someone with, right? So I want to offer to you the workbook. The workbook. I mentioned earlier that the workbook is for a good cause. It's for a friend of mine who has a memorial fund in her son's name who committed suicide earlier this year. And she wants to ensure, as well as I, that no other mother goes through what she went through. It's a lifelong journey. I can't even imagine what that's like, but I want to provide some seed money. I'm just asking $7. So if you know of someone that can use the workbook, I might actually put the workbook in other spaces, but this is for you right now that I want to share. So the workbook is $7. It's actually in the Facebook group. So if you look in the Facebook group, there's a little stripe there. Just click it. And if you want to share that with someone because you know what it's for, what the cause is for, then share it. And in sharing, let me know because I reward people that share. So if you share the group, if you share the workbook, then I have prizes for you. Different prizes. One of the prizes has to do with an Amazon gift card. I figured anybody could use an Amazon gift card because you can always order something online and have it sent to you. So an Amazon gift card is one of the prizes. The other prize is a VIP opportunity. What's VIP? Very important person. You are a very important person. And I have an opportunity for 5 people to do VIP with me, but I am giving one away. So that'll end up being 6. But I have a VIP opportunity, and that VIP opportunity is $47. And we get to go hand in hand backstage and go over some of the principles in creating a challenge, or I could do some clarity with you where we can go deep into solving problems because I'm actually on the consulting track where I'm becoming licensed to be a certified consultant. I am in the coaching program and the 100X certification program. So I am on the path for the credentials. However, I want to spend time with you for a crazy, ridiculous price, but I'm going to give one of those away for free, and that's for sharing. So share, and then I'll see who the winner is. So those are 2 prizes. Share often. Don't have to share once, share often, because I think there are a myriad of people that need to hear this, that need to know that there are some ditches that you can fall into when it comes to inheriting property. And we do not want to fall in a ditch. Because we have an inheritance, we don't want it to be stolen. We don't want to give it away. We want to receive it and we want to be able to pass it on. Like I said, my sister, her children's inheritance, I believe, was stolen. Literally, it was stolen. And so I don't want that to happen to any of you. I want you to take full advantage of what you know and actually take some action. Take that workbook, open it up, type it. You can actually type on the workbook as well. Type some notes, some things that action steps you are going to take. Things that now you've realized, oh, that's true. I do need to do that. And don't just say you need to do it, actually do it. Take some action. Swift action gets rewarded. So you'll get rewarded with the sharing, and you'll get rewarded by just being here and learning, right? Learning, growing, and sharing. So I want to thank you for spending this time with me. I did start on time, but it didn't actually start streaming through Facebook. So I did a reboot, and I believe I've given you value today. And if I have, if you could just put in the chat, if you could go live in the group and share your biggest takeaway, I give rewards for that. So I would appreciate it if you would take time to purchase the workbook, take time to share, and I will take time to reward you. Again, the rewards, Amazon gift card and VIP access. So those two things. And the VIP access, I'll post that in the group tonight. I'm not going to do a VIP tonight. Well, I could, but I'll do a VIP starting tomorrow. Then I'll do a bonus VIP session. So tonight, I just wanted to lay the foundation of what this is all about so that you can go out and have some conversations and avoid some ditches. Okay? So it's been my pleasure serving you, and I look forward to sharing even more tomorrow on time. And have a great night. Okay? Bye.